CEO. I found out today that you're CEO.
I'm a podcaster.
I was like, wait, I'm going to interview CEO. So then I had like all this anxiety grow in me.
Hey.
And then I was like, okay, fine. Then I saw you like former country director,
I'm just an officer.
Jumo, and then I was like product and business development lead. I was like, okay.
Hey, I
Big
sound like
deal.
I've done things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, when the pandemic came, we're not essential workers, so
Wait, you
I'm
are
not
not?
essential.
You are not?
No, anyone who could have been at home and the
Yeah.
world continued,
Yeah,
we're not
yeah.
essential. So
Okay, I see. So Joe, when I came, when I was thinking about doing this interview, I didn't know about all these. So I want us now to start from those, and then we go to the reason why we're interviewing
Okay.
now. So
okay.
yeah. Hi Joel.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Good. Thank you for doing this interview.
It's my pleasure. How are you?
Today I had a really bad day,
Oh, sorry.
but it's fine.
It will get better.
It will.
Alan and I are here.
Thank you.
Yeah, our goatees will make everything well. My goatee will make everything better.
Thank you so much. So Joe, before we start with everything else and, the purpose of whatever we are doing today, I would just like for you to tell our audience about that side that is not the podcaster side. The whole CEO and big huge deal side. Who is Joel?
Who am I? I'm not used to talking about my professional work. So I'm currently the CEO of FlyHub, which is a technology company under Standard Bank in Uganda. And I never thought I would be a CEO. So the same shock people have that you have on your face, I take it as a good thing because I never think of myself in those matters. It's like an office I occupy.
Right.
But I've always been distrustful of fully identifying with the work that you do.
Right.
I used to make this joke, which I think my boss doesn't like me making. Whenever I'm introduced and they start reading those things, CEO, product manager at some point, country director, all those things. I'm always looking behind me to see
who are they talking about?
Yeah, who's that guy? Yeah, because there's always a gap between that symbolic role and how I'm supposed to show up. Because when you hear those things, you think, oh, a serious guy in a suit is coming.
Yeah.
Then I show up. So there's always that gap, and in psychoanalysis they call that gap symbolic castration. So whenever people say that, I'm like, thanks for a castrating experience of saying all these nice things, and then me, I don't feel like I occupy them. But yeah, my work is typically in building digital products, trying to make sure they are relevant for the different users that are supposed to be engaging with them.
Right.
But I think I'm just fortunate, and I ended up doing work in stuff that is interesting to me because I've always been interested in the political economy of technology. Like, I think the tools that we use change us. So I'm interested in looking at how the tools we create change us, and how do those changes that we make in ourselves change the world. Yeah, so that's my work, but I try and bracket it and then have another space where I can explore a little bit more widely. So yeah, that's me.
Through the podcast, that's why you explore more widely.
Through the podcast, I think I'm also trying to write a bit more. I used to write I used to write on a blog. I used to submit things that would go to the newspaper.
Oh, very nice.
But yeah, now I'm thinking about doing a little bit more writing, just to clarify my ideas, but also to get other people to engage with them. So yeah, that's me.
Okay. It's nice to meet the capitalistic Joel.
They're all being squeezed by the system. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
We must participate.
Hey, I'm a reluctant capitalist.
I see. Okay, so now moving on from that side. The time we met, I think at that point I hadn't started my podcast yet. It was just pretty much an idea. And then, you're like very quick to offer your free consultation and then also to really talk about the topic.
Yeah.
which is, childhood traumas and the effects that they can have on us. So now we want to get a little bit more personal.
Okay.
So now, who is the personal Joel? Tell us about you, your childhood, and your family, and how you grew up, basically.
Wow, that's a very big topic. So I am the firstborn of three. Born to my parents, who are both still alive.
Hey.
They both raised me. I was born in Entebbe. We moved around quite a bit when I was young. I don't remember a lot of it. All I remember was there were always different spots we could be in till my dad got a job with the government. He was working in the Ministry of Works, and we ended up moving to this nice little place here. It didn't look this nice when we came. It was this row, actually, funny enough, that's how old I am. This place used to be for civil servants, Elgon Terrace and Lower Kololo Terrace. They were all government houses, and when he moved in, at a certain point they were put on for mortgages, and he was able to get a mortgage and eventually get the house. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in a nice space like this. So it was fortuitous. I'm the firstborn of a man who's not a firstborn himself, but acts as a firstborn in his family.
Right.
My mother is, I think, the second last born in her family. And I think I grew up a proper lower middle class, then became middle class socio-culturally.
Okay.
Went to Chitante, all the usual things, the people who you find on Twitter.
Yes.
They keep saying I'm a planned kid, so I was a planned kid, but the plan was not that. I keep teasing that old man that he should have had a longer plan. I should be in like New York now. I mean, come on, he just gave me enough of a space to be here.
Yeah. Clearly didn't do enough.
We can always blame our parents. That that saying.
That's why you're having the topic, childhood trauma.
I think my childhood was it was fun, but it was also a little confusing. I'll put it into context. I was always a kid who was out on my own, doing my own thing. So my parents at the time were both working, and so I used to spend a lot of time by myself with the kids in the neighborhood or with a nanny. And the nanny at the time, to keep me chill, would give me a book or tell me to read something.
Right.
But she'd pick books from my dad's library.
Right.
So I'd read like these old stories of Greek gods, or read some stories about how an aqueduct was built. So my dad's a quantity surveyor and an engineer.
Okay.
So he always had structural engineering and design books. And so it would like paint vivid imaginations. When they would come home, I would try and tell them those stories. And I distinctly remember my parents used to listen to me when I would talk to them.
Oh.
And they wouldn't talk to me in baby talk. So I remember, I was like, yes. Today I read this, and
Yeah.
that's my memory, and it sort of rhymes with what they say.
Yeah.
It became a bit confusing, I think, when I went to school.
Right.
Because when I went to school, I found like you couldn't ask too many questions. You had to sit still in one place. My parents have never beat me. They've never hit me. So I never experienced
nice.
corporal punishment or anything of that nature. So I remember seeing a child being hit, and I was like, how can you be that big and then you're beating someone smaller than you to get a point? How can violence be the answer? In class, they used to ask me to tell stories because I used to talk quite a bit if I was bored. So the way a teacher would get me to engage with, you come and finish all the things you want to say and tell us a story. Then I'll tell a story, and things were relatively funny. So I always had a way of finding out stupid, silly things and making people laugh about them. Then when I became a teenager, I think I got a little bit more introspective, a little bit more reserved and pulled away. I noticed that my parents were not as happy.
Right.
Eventually it led to them getting a divorce, which meant I felt like I had to grow up quite fast because they were both quite busy, especially my dad was not around much. My mom was working at the time for the European Union. So, I was usually left in charge. And so dealing with my younger siblings, my brother and my sister, I became like junior parent.
Junior parent.
Yeah.
At what age?
This is about, at around 8 to 9, I felt like there were more responsibilities I had to take. Like I knew how to get people to the hospital. I knew how you're supposed to clean things. I knew close the door. These are the numbers. This is how you can prepare basic meals.
Right.
And then my parents split up when I was about 14, 15. Got divorced when I was about 18.
Right.
So yeah, progressively, I just felt like, yeah, you have to take up responsibility for things. High school, the introspection came in terms of I felt like the family was falling apart.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why. I needed some sense of why are these people who are supposed to be my direction in life, who are supposed to know everything,
Yeah.
how can they be falling apart? And I think in some sense it led me to the church.
Okay.
Because we're not really that religious. Like we used to go to church every now and then, but it was not a serious thing. My parents used to give us this thing of, yeah, there are different ways you can think of God, you can understand so many different aspects. So I always came at it in this thing of, oh, it's fascinating, but not I'm going to hell, I'm going to burn.
Yeah.
So when I saw those things in school, I was like, hey, you real mean we're going to be finished?
You know?
Yeah, but I remember when I said the sinner's prayer, it was in Budo.
Yeah.
I think S1. They made us watch something called Hell's Bells, where they show you the musicians who are going to hell because they're giving you evil things.
Yeah.
And I remember I said the prayer of like Lord, I think there's a verse that says, test and see that the Lord is good. So I decided to say the sinner's prayer, and of course I wasn't that serious about it in high school.
Wait, is the sinner's prayer the Lord's prayer?
No, it's the one of Lord, forgive me my sins, I commit my life to you, blah, 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 blah. It was like the standard thing they would say in Budo.
Okay. Wow, crazy.
And then, yeah, I got serious about my faith, I think, in S6 vacation. I was working at the time, but I had this longing to understand how the world worked.
Yeah.
And I know now that I was more interested in things like anthropology or sociology, trying to understand those things. But here, the depth of that, why are things the way they are,
Yeah.
seemed to be in church. So I ended up in church things, and yeah, maybe I'll tell you other stories after that. Yeah, so that was my life. It was more or less happy when I was younger, taking up some responsibilities. I didn't lack for food or for security, but I felt that when my parents were sort of splitting up that, your world can just change all of a sudden.
Yeah. You know, when you're talking, I was just thinking, planned kid, okay. Happy childhood, okay. This all sounds good. So I was trying to get to the part of
where is it? When is the other shoe going to drop?
What is the interest here? And then you actually dropped it, and then I get it. But now speaking just specifically about that period of, having to grow up and having to be a parent, junior parent, real, and then your parents' divorce. How then do you think that affected you or changed you?
I think it's still changing me in a certain way. So I've come to think that I'll give you an example of like a scar. There's this scar I have on my forehead. So when immediately it was a car accident. I was walking home from school, and a guy was trying to overtake, drove on the sidewalk, and then the car hit me in the face. And there was a piece of glass in there. Now at the time I was in shock, so I felt like I was okay. I got back up and people are looking at me like, oh God. So it's weird when everyone's looking at you like, oh God, you're in trouble.
Yes.
But I'm like, I feel fine.
Yeah.
Only to look here and feel like, there's a lot of blood, what's going on? And then afterwards, people started saying, oh, it's a cool scar. So my relationship with it changed. Like, if immediately after, there was like, oh, there's an accident, I'm invincible. Oh God, this is terrifying. Oh God, people are saying they're so sorry for me. Then afterwards, I was like, this is a cool thing.
Yeah.
So in a way, I think as time goes on, the past gets recontextualized because of everything around you. But I think the way it changed me was I got to understand that at a very young age, maybe this stems from the fact that my parents were doing their, I know now that they were trying to do their best to provide for us.
Yeah.
But them not being around, I was extra sensitive to the notion that you better do things for yourself. You better figure out how to do it. And also I learned that they were, now I know I could feel they were stressed.
Yeah.
So whenever they would come home, like, So are you okay? Did anyone do anything to you? All of that stuff. So I became the person who
Yeah.
would reassure them, like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So my old man keeps telling me on my 5th birthday, I I had a party here,
Yeah.
this compound,
Okay.
and I brought gifts for my friends on my birthday. And I was like, who buys gifts for their friends? So I was like, no, I want them to have a good time.
Yeah.
But it was not like a premeditated thing of I'm trying to be super nice. I just felt happier when the people around me were happy.
Yeah.
And I think that stems from I was extra sensitive to
Yeah.
an unhappiness, a sort of an unease in the home,
Yeah.
which is a trait I think I share with my siblings. My brother is also extra sensitive to those things. His response was that he pulled away quite a bit. So he's highly independent, not even in the country.
Oh, wow.
Same thing for my sister, but for her it came in the form of anxieties. So I came to learn that my folks also share this. If there's one thing we all share, it is an extra sensitivity to feeling, to sensing that, okay, something is not right.
Yeah.
And because my dad doesn't drink, I didn't drink for a long time, so I didn't have a coping mechanism. So my coping mechanism was to read and find stories and find other life experiences to let me know that pain is not unique to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I also developed a sense of humor about things to kind of go, it's not that serious. Yeah, that's what I think. In some way, maybe it may be not very traditional. So I'm always surprised when I hear how people grew up.
Right.
That they were hit or they couldn't ask their parents things or they had curfew. I'm like, curfew? Like my dad would just be like, hey, if you're out there, just tell me what you're doing.
Communicate.
Yeah, just let us know. You met him and you were saying how you're saying communicate.
Yeah.
So he was always lecturing me on things. So imagine growing up with a person who, in my mind, my dad was the smartest person in anything.
Yes.
And it doesn't help that when I would be around other adults, they would say the same thing about him. So everyone, I think, thinks their father, when they're young, is like the king. But then when you see other adults are saying it about him.
The same thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so I always felt like I need to live up to, making him proud. I thought that accomplishments would, bring them around.
Yeah.
I don't think it was conscious, but, when I was much younger, I think trying in school, playing sports, just trying to do all the things you're supposed to do because it will get you the affection that you think you need.
Yes.
Then when I was a teenager, I was like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I went the other direction and became a bit rebellious.
Right.
Yeah, so I think in some senses it did affect me, but I always wonder if I was not going to be this anyway. It's hard to see what the only cause of you becoming a certain way is, but definitely the home I grew up in made me a little different from the average. I always felt a little bit different from everyone else, but I know how to fit in. I always knew how to, tone down on those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've mentioned something about being rebellious, and there is, of course,
She's come with receipts.
I have come with receipts.
Christ.
Um,
I need my lawyers.
there is a certain something I found on Twitter. And I was like,
she followed me. I just saw that you followed me.
yes, I did. And I was like, what stage was that?
We have to show that picture of me with the dreadlocks.
What stage was that?
How old was I? I think I was 27 there. 27, 28. I had been, so my late teens into my early 20s, I was very devoted in church. I, was part of a youth group at All Saints. And, now that I look back, we were quite conservative. Even though I never really bought into the conservative thing, I just, didn't want to stand out too much. And when I eventually did leave church, there was a period where I thought to myself, try things out there, things that you've never experienced. And so I just started growing my hair, and particularly because these guys were like, huh? Are you going to become a ganja salesman? I was like, in fact, you're now going to see it for sure. So I grew it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what that representation was, just me exploring different things. And I used to be jealous of women, that they could change their hairstyles, wear all kinds of things. And for us, we were just very limited things that we could do. I'm not yet ready to start wearing very bright clothes. Like if I wore red trousers, I would look uncomfortable.
Or red shorts.
Or red shorts, yeah. The people would be like, I think
Go back.
they would look at me and say, you don't seem comfortable in what you're wearing. So I can try it with my hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that phase. It was just me trying out different looks and different experiences. Yeah.
Okay. You're saying that, and I started growing my own dreadlocks at the same age.
Yeah.
So now I'm worried.
Yeah. This is what you have to look out to become. So I'm very sorry. It doesn't end well.
No. Tell me, how did it end?
You see where I am. Look at me.
At what stage did you stop?
Growing the hair.
Mm-hmm.
I cut it off after about 18 months of growing it.
Okay.
I saw myself in a picture and I was like, my head is very big.
Yeah.
Like excuse me, can you imagine?
No, you gave me your shades and they were quite big. But let's go on.
Big head. Look at Alan running his head. Yeah, so I at some point, I think I tried so many things. I was at a phase where I'm going to go to the club, I'm going to do all these things I didn't, which people were doing at university that I never did. So I tried to do them, but then I realized as I was doing them, it was not really that I desired doing them. It's just that I felt that something was being kept from me.
I see.
Now that I look back at it, I'm not oriented to doing stuff just for the sake of it. I would do it out of maybe curiosity.
Yeah.
At that time, it didn't last. So
Yeah.
there was just like a phase of like 3-4 years of me trying out stuff, and then it ended. I think I came back to the middle. I was reacting to what I thought I had missed out on by being born again Christian for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go to the other question, this is now just about being a planned
kid, yeah.
You know, I'm gonna troll you about that. There is
It was like a 2-year plan, not a long plan.
Still, that's good enough.
Yeah.
You know, some people were hit and you don't know what that is.
Hey, I mean, what can I say?
Right? Privilege.
Yeah, that's right.
Plan.
In fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to create privilege. Thanks to my parents.
Yeah. So, you know, sometimes, especially on social media, you can see a lot of planned kids trying to share their pain in different forms. You know, some are just really being vulnerable. Some are just really being rebellious, like you know you were at some point. But they receive a lot of negativity from others. You know, there is this sort of feeling that as a planned kid, you are not allowed to cry out your suffering just because you are privileged. Is that something you've experienced at all in this your journey?
No.
Okay.
Well, yes and no. I think I'm intimately aware of how much people have going on in their own lives. And I'm more interested in hearing what's going on with them. And I'm quite careful about the spaces where I start saying what's going on with me. Because complaining about your shoes squeezing your feet around people who are, you know, don't have legs is it's a bit insensitive. So the problem I think with the internet is social media encourages you to be yourself and to be authentic, but it's also a space where everybody is. So you're speaking to the communication will land and someone will read it in the way they're seeing it. And I guess my relationship with it has always been a little bit different. I'm a older millennial, so I always treated the internet as it's not a place that I think I'm going to go to get compassion.
Right.
It's not a place that I'm going to get genuine connection. I see generations, well, not generations, but people who grew up a little bit more with the internet as a formative thing. I like to use the phrase that part of our souls are in this thing.
Right.
Because if your soul is your attention, it is your effort, it is your image, and you curate it. When someone insults that, they're insulting you to some extent. So I've learned not to put too much of myself there, and at least when I do, Alan knows I'm always like, with a mixed thought about putting my image out there on this podcast. But I realize that the form of the internet requires you to have your personality there so that they can listen to you. If I had my druthers about me, I would rather not talk about myself. because I think it's ideologically, how can I put it? You know, when you read a book and at the back they tell you the author in their spare time cuts grass, does
Yes,
this.
yes.
Like, I'm like, what is that for? Why should I see that? So like, imagine you read a very good story and then you read the back of the novel and they're like, oh, this person is a practicing Nazi, the murder people. Suddenly you go, now the ideas are stupid. You know what I mean? So
immediately you hate
it's
them.
like, I need to know who you are so that I can listen to your ideas.
Yes,
That's the way it
yes,
is.
yes.
So yeah, you see, I know. What if you saw the painting and you're like, this is nice. Oh, this guy's a genocidal murderer. Oh, Jesus, it's not nice, not good. So it also feels good to be seen. And I think
It
that
does.
we are so hard on ourselves because everyone who's out there is leading with, I need to make myself be strong. I don't care what people think.
Yeah.
But naturally, we're all vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so when someone is being vulnerable, it can feel offensive to us because we look at their lives and say, if I had what you had, I would not be unhappy.
Yes.
And I learned that at a certain point, especially when you'd be around. So I think I was fortunate in that I saw my parents come from not having much to start earning things. So I know what it was like for us to say, okay, we have to pay for school fees, meaning that we are not going to have bread, we're not going to have this, to suddenly, oh, there's plenty of bread. Oh, now we're in this new fancy spot. Oh, okay. So there's some memories of what that costs, and I'm cognizant of the fact that you can forget. No matter how comfortable you get, there's always a pain.
Yeah.
And this may sound very play a violin, but if you have material pains, it is very present. It is very there. It's always in your face.
Yeah.
But when you have the pendulum swing the other side to you're in relative comfort, you have existential pains.
Yeah.
I think those are slightly harder for you to get rid of because you don't just buy food and it goes. If you're hungry, you get food.
Right.
If you're without shelter, you get that.
Yeah.
But how do you find a meaningful identity? Like that you have to work out with other human beings. And precisely going on social media to try and do that, I think is a mistake. I think it can only augment, but you need to be in a community with people who see the full 360 of who you are, who are embedded in where you are.
Yeah.
And probably this is why people stick to other people who are like them, because they'll
Yeah.
speak about the problems that they have, which is unfortunate. I think we can learn to see each other's pains, because I think being middle class, unfortunately, we start looking at the aspiration of where we want to go.
Yeah.
And we forget that if you are the one selling your labor to make money, you have way more in common with the border guy, with the person who sells water, than Sudhir who makes money from owning assets.
Yeah.
But social culturally, you feel you're closer this way. And because of that, because you have just enough comfort to look away. And I think that's the thing that people who are planned kids like myself have to admit. It's hard to admit that you don't see things.
Yeah.
So I'm never offended when people say, oh, you just have privilege. All I'll say is, yeah, I have privilege. And yes, I sometimes will leverage it, but I'm trying to extend it to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And it's not, whatever I have now is not only because of my merit. I lived a long life thinking that I worked hard and earned everything that I got. Of course, hard work was part of it, but several people work hard. We all started from different places. I didn't ask for the intellect. I didn't ask for the way I look. I didn't, like, all these things I was just thrown into the world.
Yes.
And when I think on that, it gives me more compassion for everyone to go. Not everyone was as fortunate as me.
Yeah.
So let me try and share that fortune. But then I also see other people have more, and it's distasteful when I think they somehow think that the way and the order of the world is right, that some people who can just be brought out of oblivion and this short period of life, they decide to suffer, and you think, well, that's just the way the world is. It's, I find it despicable. So yeah, as a planned kid, I try to, talk about how much I'm planned. I also have to remind myself, it's not a moral judgment, it is a factual statement that I am more privileged than the average Ugandan. It's like, what do you do with that privilege?
Yeah. I think you're doing a great job with it. For example, I just kept thinking what you're doing is like podcast charity. It's really amazing sharing your platform that you've actually built, over the years to support people that are starting out and may not have as much community as you have built. So I think that's just something I kept thinking about, and that's the name I gave it. Yeah. So Joe, I understand you're into philosophy. I was hoping that when I come, you do not use hard English words.
I will do my best.
Yes, and also quote these guys that you quote. There's a guy you quoted in your in your tweet, the one you pinned. The 23rd lesson. How do we pronounce that guy? He starts with letter E.
Letter E.
This one. This one.
Oh, Epictetus.
Oh gosh.
You have to say it carefully.
Yeah, that
Alan,
guy.
say it. Epic what?
Ooh, I like it. I would do the same. Yeah. So I was hoping that we and I don't have to go like, can you say that again? Can you elaborate and things like that?
I've had that feedback quite a bit, so I'm trying to be a little bit better about it. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So at what point did you get into philosophy, and what was your driving force?
I think when I was younger, because so funny enough, we didn't have a TV for many years when I was for many years when we had just come here. So I think we had bought a TV, and then after 3 days we were robbed, like at gunpoint. Okay. And I remember waking up, and there was a guy with a gun at me, and he was like, "Oh, sleep, baby." Then the thing that offended me was like, "I'm not a baby. I'm a full grown. I'm 6." But anyway, after they stole the TV and stuff, the only stuff that was left around were books to read.
Yeah.
So there used to be these comic books that had like stories from the Bible, and then there were these old books that my dad had brought from England, which had like tales of the Canterbury Tales, and at the back they used to have like things like, oh, this is from Greek philosophy on this, or this is about Thomas Hobbes, blah, blah, blah. It was educational material. Yeah. So I didn't know any better. I just started looking up at the stuff. But I ended up in church. And in church, I think, unfortunately, what happens here, or in many places, I think in mainstream church, there is a thing where you're now in the congregation, you come, and then someone who's learned teaches you. You just sit and get it. And I used to feel like I carry this Bible all the time, but I don't know how it came to be. And so I spent my VAC. This is how much of a nerd I am. I spent my VAC going to a 6 VAC. I went to Tanzania for a small, it was like a 1 month induction for you to understand how you're supposed to read the Bible, how did it come to be. And then the internet was starting to become a little bit more of a thing. So I was just curious, following different threads. If Wikipedia had been around, that's what I would have been doing. And I think what drew me to it was there were questions and things I would ask people, and they would just go, huh? Yeah. Like, as in, why are you saying that? Yeah. So here I felt like anything can be given purchase, and it's a special feeling when you think you're the only person who has ever thought something, and then you find that some other people have thought it, and they've gone through it, and you can feel their pain. So I felt like a kinship with people who were trying to understand stuff. Yeah. Early on, I thought philosophy was wisdom. Yesterday, I was telling someone that good philosophy is not but it's anti-wise sayings or wise men, because wisdom can be very normative and very conservative. The example that can be given, I think Slavoj Zizek says this again. Sorry, I've dropped the name.
It's fine. I don't know who that is, but
this guy knows him. About you can almost find a wise saying for any choice you make in life. Right. Like someone may go, hey, look, you only have one life to live, so make sure you enjoy it. YOLO. Make sure you maximize it. YOLO. Okay, that's a form of. They say, but you know what? Life is very long, and the choices you make early are going to affect where you're going to be. You need to be careful. Like now, both of those sayings are wise. So in a way, you can find something that has some rationale, some logic behind it, and make it the universe. You universalize a particular. When I fell in love with philosophy, it was saying that, well, how do those two things exist, and how can they have kernels of truth? Yeah. And that's when I got to understand that it stays in a dialectic. Like you one part captures a certain truth, another part captures a certain truth.
Yeah.
But if you take one as the truth,
Yeah.
you are sort of blinding yourself. You're sort of cutting yourself off from
Yeah.
another insight.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the insight as it's presented is correct. It just means that there is something in there that can improve your understanding of the world.
Yeah.
And why I also learned that you need to have dialogue. I feel like now we've become so individualized, even in faith. A lot of people say, maybe this is controversial, but people say this is my personal Lord and Savior. I've never found that anywhere in the scriptures. I think it's taken from the thing of, okay, Jesus would, even if 99 are safe and one is lost, I'll come for you.
He'll come and get
Yeah.
you.
And so we've had this one-to-one relationship, but every single understanding of the Abrahamic gods was that it's God with us and God amongst us. It is when
Yeah.
we are together.
Yeah.
And that thread comes from the Ubuntu thoughts that were happening in East Africa, the ones that were happening in Mesopotamia, the ones that were happening in Greece. Like so many different cultures have come to the point where they found out that God assembles where we are together. And even when you read in the Bible about the Tower of Babel, the only thing that ever scared God was when people were working together to do something. He said, hey man, there's nothing that is short, nothing can fail them. And I think we've now gone the complete opposite, where it's so difficult for us to do things together to have
anymore,
solidarity, to do stuff. And I think the world has told us that if you go deep inside and if you have a personal relationship, you're fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so difficult for us to connect with one another. And yet that connection is really what feeds us. We are because several people are. So philosophy helped me find a way towards connecting with people, because as a kid I felt separate because I liked these questions.
Yeah.
But another part of me really enjoyed laughing and being around people. So I was like, how do I connect those two?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, the joy that comes from not thinking about yourself allows you to endure things. When I'm by myself and I'm musing on my problems and I'm, struggling, I get depressed. I get nihilistic, or I start thinking, what are my traumas? I'm struggling, and maybe if I go deeper and deeper, I'm going to be healed. And a blessing for me has been discovering that there are other ways of thinking about the issues of life. You don't have to become fully healed, but you can find through your symptom a way to be of service to other people, and getting yourself off your mind is probably the biggest blessing, because once a giving hand doesn't think about what it lacks, it's able to see what it can give. So philosophy came to me in those dark periods where I connected with people and ideas that then pushed me back to connecting with human beings. It never left me in books alone. Yeah.
Ah, I see. On this journey, my example is I just made 30 recently. And
Welcome.
thank you very much. I feel young. But I've had these phases of when I was like 21, there are some lessons that came to me. When I was 25, there were some lessons and realizations as well that came to me. Now I am 30, there are some lessons and realizations that have come to me, right?
Yeah.
So I want to understand at what point in your beautiful bubble or challenging or whatever that is, did the shitstorm come back? Do you know what I mean? Where, that's how it starts. You're just like, oh my gosh, everything is just opening up now. At what stage was that?
There have been many stages. Let me see which one I can explain. I think one of the biggest ones was when I left to do my master's. So I went to the US to study.
Ooh, planned kid.
And everyone was like, hey, the planned kid has left. He's going, So everyone is like, you should be happy. But the first 2 months I was very miserable. Okay. Because I realized that maybe that's now I understand that if you carry someone and move them into a new environment, it's like you remove a plant and put it in the house. For a few days it seems like it's the same thing, but the environment that made it what it was is no longer the same. So the social relations that used to keep me happy, you may call me a very independent person, but I also self-regulate by having certain rituals. I'll wake up, I'll run at a certain point, I'll see these people, I'll read, like I know what I'm doing in specific times. And that, I think regularity keeps me sort of grounded. It keeps me even keel.
Yeah.
So when I moved to another place, that was lacking. Like I didn't know how to use the vending machine, calculating the dollars. People have different access around you. Time was different. Facebook had just started, so you try and check, but it wasn't as active as it is now. So I had a lot of time by myself.
Yeah.
And I was starting to wonder, like, am I really doing the right thing? I had broken up with my girlfriend because, I was going to be there. She was going to be here, and then was thinking of going to the UK. Like, our lives were going in different directions. So I felt like stuff was splitting apart, and then my faith started also disappearing, because for the first time I realized that because of the social bonds I had around church, there were questions I wanted to ask, but I never could ask them because it was rude. I felt it would hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah.
And because I didn't ask, those people are no longer around, I started asking those questions. I was like, but wait, why are we all going to hell?
Yeah.
Like, why would we be created to burn forever? Like, why wouldn't we disappear? And thankfully that took me to getting deeper into theology, understanding more and more educated, nuanced, separate ideas of what this relationship with faith means. But for me, I think there was initial anger because I thought that what I had been taught was wrong. So I ended up rejecting it. Actually, when people read my blog, there's a thing called Musings of a Timid Observer.
Okay.
That's the name of the blog. And then there's an entry, the deconversion of Anthony. Right. And when I read it now, I'm like, ugh. Because a lot of it was, hey, the cosmological argument doesn't make sense. But logically, like that logic bro stuff. But I think it was a necessary stage for me to go through, because at the time faith was supposed to be not deny, but like in the face of science, if it goes against what the Bible says, choose the Bible by faith. And now I got to a point where I was like, no, but there has to be some truth in what this is saying that makes me reinterpret this differently. And that goes back to maybe the dialectical thing I was talking about, in terms of it's very hard to just pick one truth and say that's the only thing.
Yeah.
There's another type of truth.
Yeah.
It's just like, if I look at you and then I say, what's important about you is on the inside. If someone took that literally and just started cutting you up, they would find guts. They will never find it. We'll say, okay, these shoes, they're Jordans and they have a certain value. If you try and tear it apart, you won't find the value in it. It's something on a different level. It's a symbolic thing. So I think my crisis of faith came through because nothing had happened in terms of God had disappointed me or anything of that nature. I felt really blessed. I had had a good life, relatively speaking, but I just felt like I could not believe the things I used to believe, which also scared me because I was going to get away from the one community that I had created with my friends. I really loved being in fellowship. I felt like when you're with different people from all walks of life and you're working towards a common goal, and we used to break bread together, and there's something about that camaraderie, something that I still even miss now, about being in that group of people who have a sort of shared vision, a shared ambition. And I felt like when I lost that, it was a real shitstorm. And unfortunately, I landed on the new atheist jazz. So I'm more embarrassed about that period than I am about having been in church. Because when I was in church, it was about community. This one was about, I'm so wise because suddenly I've now seen that, this stuff is silly. But to me, they have a certain point, but it's so incomplete as to be not something that you should focus on. I have a friend who used to say, if you find anyone who has argued into believing in God, that person is a heretic. And I was like, what do you mean?
What's heretic?
So it means that they are putting forth a sort of logical, like how can you logically come to believe in the divine? All the church father said, you have to have a leap of faith. The truth has to become alive in you and you have to take a leap.
Yes.
There's that book, Fear and Trembling, which I really enjoyed. If anyone wants to read a philosophical Christian book,
right?
Søren Kierkegaard is one to read, Fear and Trembling. And in that he was talking about, everyone is talking about Christendom. His question was, how can you be a Christian in Christendom? Because at the time Denmark was Christian, everyone would say they're Christian, then he would say, it doesn't feel like everyone is Christian. It just feels like it's now just another identity that you hold on to and you do a ritual. And his question was, I'm still trying to understand what Abraham was thinking when he went to the top of that hill because he had to be the father of faith. He was like, they said that's the father of faith. What does faith believe? It was believing two contradictory things at the same time. One, that I am going to kill my son, and at the same time I'm not going to lose him. It does not make any sense. There's no way to reconcile them, but he believed it, and he's like, I'm still trying to understand how can you live that kind of way. And it's like, if you don't wrestle with that, oddly enough, he's credited as the person who came up with the concept of anxiety.
Wow, okay.
And for him, anxiety was the dizziness of freedom. It's that we are anxious because we understand just how infinite our choices are, that in any moment you can make choices. But at the same time, we're also finite in the things that have determined our emotions, how we think and all of that. So at the one and same time, you're a finite being that can conceive of infinity. And it's like those two, how can they be together? And it's like when you come to faith, that's the only thing that recognizes that uncanny nature of being human. And he's like, it's always going to be an open question. So I feel like when I started reading those things, they kind of mess you up. I tell everyone, you'd rather not read philosophy because it's going to fuck you up. It will reframe questions, and it will show you how deep in shit you are. But it also provides what I think is hope and not optimism. Optimism is just like, oh, let's hang around. Maybe something good will happen. Maybe something from above will happen to make things better for us. But hope forces you to look for a reason for things to work out. So the shitstorm was leaving here. It was, my parents' breakup, of course. Losing certain friends, gaining things that I thought I wanted, climbing up in the corporate career, and then realizing that it was isolating, and realizing that it's not, that we live at the luxurious point of exploitation. And right now I'm actually going through that radical understanding of if I hold a phone, it's a necessary thing for me, but there's a lot of pain and suffering that went into making this phone. That the global supply system requires slavery, requires people who are at the gunpoint of what it takes to extract minerals from the ground. Like if we had to pay people fairly to do that, there is no way we could afford this. So it's connected, like the wealth of the world and the poverty of the world are connected. And before, I never used to see that connection. Once you start to see systemically, you start to feel like, oh God, but then there's a trap in you trying to assume responsibility for all of it. The responsibility cannot be individual, it is collective. So that's why I'm now looking at how many more people can I say, do you see this shit? Maybe let's see if we can figure it out. Because if I try and do it myself, the individual response to a systemic problem is exit. Just try and run. Let me make as much money as possible and exit and go and live somewhere. So most guys either become nihilistic. You see, like, let's go away. I don't want to convince all these guys. But wherever you go, that shit will find you.
Absolutely.
So I think it's sappy and it's annoying, and I know Alan's going to laugh at me. It's like the answer is love. Can you imagine?
I know, right? I get you. And that's so crazy. I think there is a way philosophy happened to you. There's a way it happens to other people. And it's not philosophy to them, but it's just certain levels of realization that then starts to shift thinking and the way we view things. I really don't know what mine was, because I do read. I'm not a philosopher, so I keep saying that one time I'll be like a really like I'll be a motivational speaker, and people would be like coming to me to hear words of wisdom, and they'll be asking, what's your source, and then I'll be like, I'm just a delusional person. I don't know where this is coming from.
It's all delulu, guys.
Exactly. So for maybe people that are having a hard time understanding philosophy, do you think we can just call it delusion?
Maybe, I suppose. Well, I think, unfortunately, philosophy has become such an academic thing. And it seems so removed. But in truth, it's just to love learning. That's what it is. And there's a reason when you go to university, they go, PhD is philosophy, technique. But all the subjects of questions that had specific, what kind of question is it when you say, what killed this person? So a certain line of thought leads that to legal things. So like the law came out of that. Then the other one went to science. Then the other one went to biology. So there's so much that has empirical evidence. And, many scientists, even Neil deGrasse Tyson, keep saying we don't need philosophy anymore because we now have science. But that betrays the fact that we think we have reached the zenith of knowledge. The top of knowledge.
Thank you.
The apex of knowledge. We think we've reached the top of knowledge, but young children, that's why I think I still connect with Jesus in terms of the way he's represented in the Bible, as he's like, suffer the little children to come to me, because little kids ask you questions that something seems obvious, but you don't even really have an answer. Like, so why is the sky blue?
Yeah.
So it's reflecting. Over what? You're like, what do you mean? How come light is being reflected that way? Light is both a wave and a particle. You're like, what? Like a little kid will struggle to figure out what kind of question is this. And unfortunately, that's lost as you grow older. We start having answers. We start having experience. We accumulate. I have an appreciation of, but a concern about lived experience. Because lived experience means I cannot experience everything that you have the way you did, which means you have a unique advantage and some truth that you can convey.
Yes.
But it's also very easy for someone to go, it was my experience, so you cannot say anything about it. Now, for the longest time, that's how minorities, whether it be women, black people, were excluded, because they were saying that there's no way you can participate in logic that all of us can share. And so I go, your lived experience is there, but you can, through empathy, through interest, get me close enough to understand. I may not fully get it, but I can orient myself towards where you're coming from to know. I know what pain is. I may not know what your unique pain is, but I know what pain is, and I know when I'm in pain what I need to hear. So let me hear from you. So I think everyone can get into it. Already people are reading philosophy. There's an economist who once said that whenever people come up with ideas, it seems like the idea is very original to you. But what you're doing is distilling from around you thoughts that have existed for such a long time, and you come forth and say, I have thought of this thing. But there are people who have thought about it and had them lying around in order for them to even make sense to you. So I was always interested in what are these things that are around us and how do we recombine them. And the beautiful thing is you can have a conversation with someone, Epictetus, who lived before Christ, thousands of years before Christ, and can say something to you that you can then take control of. It also shows me that there are things I'm doing now that probably someone eons from today might find relative. So it has like a sort of thread which connects you with all of humanity. Language is also amazing. So for me, I would just say it's just an orientation. I'm not very clever. There are many smart people that I've met, but I've learned that it takes something more than intelligence to act intelligently in the world. It's just, I guess, what your heart and mind are connected to. I think one of the reason I'm anti that logic bro stuff is also the same reason when we see AI and people say that's intelligence. I kind of go, is it? It's probably rules and logic, but intelligence for me is you care about something and then you use all the things about you to make it come about. So if I don't know what you care about, and you're just like, we can remove logic without emotions, that to me is the dumbest thing, that you can split emotions from logic. I mean, first of all, if you are an emotional being, a logical person has to understand that you have to incorporate that into your way of thinking. So I suppose it's just curiosity, whether you call it the big words of Western philosophy, whether it's local traditions, whether it is sociology, whether it's whatever it is, there is a scintilla of sense there. A scintilla of sense.
Scintilla.
A patina. a little thing, a little some of
that thing, the some, the little some.
So I know for me sometimes it can seem very removed and can be very different, but my goal is to find other people for whom that kind of reading is interesting, but also say that you have the right to pick an idea, tear it apart, and input your own thoughts into it, because you have a perspective that could change anything. All the things around us were made by people, just people who dared to say, I have something to contribute. To me, that's philosophy, whether you're reading those books or whatever. So yeah, I think it can be Delulu. You have to be Delulu to think that you can actually change the world. But the only people who ever changed the world were the ones who were Delulu. So
yeah, I agree. You know, when it comes to like healing, and first of all, realizing that you may have some trauma stored in your body, you know, and then starting to heal. In my therapy journey, I had to not confront per se, but I had to speak to my parents. So unlike you, for me, my trauma involves a bit of hitting, involves a bit of, you know, that physical sort of violence and abuse, which is not quite nice. So I had to like sit down and say, hey, this hurt me, right? But there are so many other forms of pain and trauma that we experience as individuals that eventually come back, and we have to, like, you know, deal with them and talk to some people that, you know, you
have to confront them.
You understand? You have to confront them. The first time I met you, you said, you know, you I've also been trying to have like conversation with my dad. You know, remember when you said that?
Yes.
So I just want to speak a little bit about that. You know, when you had this conversation with your dad, what was the conversation? How did it go? What was his perceptions and all?
Yeah, you guys were seeing us here laughing and teasing each other. He was the authority figure, there was such a distance there. So he acted as the goal of, I need to reach there, become that clever, be that accomplished, so that I can be accepted.
Yes, yeah.
But at a certain point, I resented it. I was like, man, why do I have to do all this for you to accept me? But I realized that we had never had that talk. We would just clash, you know, because I'd be like, I'm going to grow my hair. Like,
yeah.
Why are you trying to show that you are different from everyone? I'm like, I wanted to aggravate him for some reason.
Yeah.
I think his anger at least showed that he could rise above being always logical.
Right.
He was always very, like, he never used to hit us. He used to say, yeah, whatever you choose to do this like this. Like, he always treated us like adults.
Yeah.
I just feel like, but don't you have any, put in Mutima, like, what's up? And we had 3 interactions. I'll maybe share those ones, which maybe you may be more comfortable with me talking about. One was when I finished high school, and then I told him, I've told this story before, when I came and said to him, like, thank you for paying for me to go through school. I just wanted to say I appreciate it. I'm not taking it for granted, and I love you. Ha!
You said what?
I said I love you, and he was like, I was eating pineapples and just swallowed them quickly. Then he said, thanks for the support.
What?
Thanks for the support. As if I had given him money to build a well. The next day he gave me 50K. I was like, look at this guy. But after that, it broke something, because after that he began talking to me about, like, I would never see that side of him who is like, I'm wondering whether we should do this. What do you think? And to me that was like, oh, he values my opinion. Fast forward later, so he got a pretty good job when he turned about 36, 37.
Right.
Became a government commissioner, you know, head of an entire department. I was like, yeah. So I had always had this goal. I had this goal of like, I need to get there before 36. If I need to train, I'm just as good. So when I got the country director role, I was like, hey, I've got it. Then I got this role of CEO, and it was just before my 30. It was in my 36th year. So I was like, I've matched you. I've matched him. Zay, I'm there. And I remember coming to tell him, and then he said something very odd. He was like, are you happy? I was like, what?
What?
I was very close to tears, because I thought, okay, I just need to do all these things, and suddenly I will get that validation that I've always wanted from him. And then he just looked at me like, by the way, I don't think I've ever demanded for you to be any kind of way. And retroactively, I started thinking like, by the way,
He never did.
I wasn't listening. He had never forced me to do any course. He would just say, do you want to try this? Do you want to try that? Even with religion, he'd be like, do you want to try this? Do you want to try that? He had never limited me in terms of who my friends could be, what stuff I could be curious about. I learned playing guitar here. I played all kinds of sports. But I think there was I needed some resistance. So I think I created resistance for myself.
You did, yeah.
And it's only in that conversation that I realized that I had come to fight to slay this dragon.
Yeah.
But the dragon was mostly within myself. And I had felt convenient for him to be that villain. So it kind of made me even reassess what success is, because from his perspective, it's just like, look, as long as you feel like you're happy and you're doing what you want to do, well and good. I trust you.
Yeah.
And the closest he came to saying, I'm very proud of you, is he would say, no, I hear some people saying the work that you're doing, and they seem to say that you're doing a good job. And I'm like, yeah, he's not embarrassing me.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys, my lip is shaking. I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna cry, I'm gonna be a tough guy. And then I think the other one was, we're dealing with some hardships at home. And he was quite sad.
Yeah.
And then the only person I used to talk to was his mother, my grandmother. And I didn't know her really well. All I know is she was a really sweet old lady, because my grandfather was almost as tall as me and very, stoic. You'd even come to see him and say, oh, what a puli. And he'd say, yeah, I'm okay. Okay, have you read your books? So he seemed very, but her, she would always smile, pinch your cheeks. She only spoke Rutoro. I spoke very little Rutoro, especially as a kid. So our interaction was mostly playful. She would even give me a little bit of money and be like, I hope you're okay, whatnot. And then I noticed that when he was around her, he would become more free. He would feel like, I'm okay, I don't need to be responsible. So when she died, it was the first time I saw him cry. Like, he went up to say something, and then he said, my best friend has died. And I was just like, oh God, I've never seen him like this. I saw the human part of him. So it was the first time I saw him cry. Then the other time he cried in my presence was, he was concerned about things around the home. He just retired. And as he was just speaking about, oh God, I don't know, there are these burdens, there's this, there's that, and I was telling him I can take them on, and I just saw him start to tear up. And I was just like, what I had always longed for had always been there. And just to be there for him and say, look, I don't have the answers, but we can go through it together. So that confrontation never happened of, why didn't you do this? I hated you. It all melted away, because I realized that the thing I had been looking for was always there. And in some instance, I think we have to forgive our parents because they're human beings. And it's quite tough, because you still have that expectation. You hope they're going to make you whole. But what I learned from that is we cannot be whole on our own, and we can bleed on each other. It had affected some of my relationships and friendships. Like, I would end up being the person who's always there for them, and then quietly resenting, why aren't you there for me?
Yes.
And I'm like, but that's a weird expectation, because on their side, they're like, but you never seem like you need anything. So how would we know? So I'm learning that to communicate, because I'm going to quote one last person. Is it okay?
Yes, that's fine.
So I remember reading this thing that Carl Jung said, the guy who was talking about having to do shadow work.
Yes.
On the psychotherapeutic side, which is kind of different from cognitive behavioral therapy, that the thing that we need the most is usually going to be found in the place that we don't want to look. And the thread from that is so much like, I started noticing that if I meet people and something about them annoys me, there's probably something in them that is reminding me of something in me that I don't want to confront. And the fact that they're okay with it is also annoying me. Now, it could fall in one of two places. It could be intuition, where I'm like, that's dangerous. But it could also be ego protecting itself. So having that humility to go, why are you annoyed by people who say that stuff? Like, I'm irritated by people who, for instance, have a big up on IQ. Then I noticed that at some point I was looking at myself wondering, can I be as smart as I think my dad is? So I had a bit of insecurity about IQ. So when people talk about it, I'm like, So now when I've resolved it, I don't have that connection to have to shut it out or not deal with it. Now the thing that I like about the Carl Jung quote is that most of us know on some level what we need to do to heal. We know but it's so difficult. Now the problem with self-knowledge, and this is why I think all religions, all people who write about stuff, is with the increase of knowledge comes an increase of sorrow. It's because you suddenly have a sense of responsibility about what it is that you know, and then you're not doing it.
Right.
And that can end up with you blaming yourself. You can become neurotic. You can start to, everyone is always talking about mental health.
Yeah.
And I wonder, we always talk about someone has bad mental health, but I'm like, we never talk about what it means to be mentally well.
Right.
It just seems there's a baseline that everyone is at, normal, abnormal. But
Yeah.
the normal can just be what everyone has socially accepted as this is fine. In the pandemic, when we all had to be quiet with our own thoughts, hey,
Yo,
guys,
man.
like guys were be in a house with no alcohol, no entertainment, just for a few days, you will reach a certain part of yourself that you've probably
Ignored. Yeah.
So to me, doing that shadow work, I often found that the things which I thought I needed to get from other people were things that were within me that I never could deal with. With my dad, it was trying to find validation. I thought if he validated me, I would be real. But there is no amount of validation that's out of there that can make me love myself. I can only accept the amount of love that I think I deserve. So now I'm getting to a point where I'm like, I think I deserve this kind of love, and I can give it away. Yeah. So then that need started disappearing, and I could now interact with him and value the time I have with him, because I no longer have this thing of, you owe me, you damaged me, why am I like this? Like we always want to have someone to blame, but I also understand that he was thrown into the world just like I was. Yeah. He has so many things that he has to deal with. I'm on that path as well with my mother. It's a little bit different. We're a little bit more separate. But
when the divorce happened, did you stay with your dad and not your mother?
Yeah, so she left for a while. Okay. And then came back at a different time, and I was angry. I was like, now can you go and then come back? Yeah. And then I was angry with him. I was like, even you are allowing, what's wrong with you?
Low standards, huh?
Yeah, I was just like, why are you? Because they were not even back together. He was just like, I need to take care of her. Like I have a responsibility. And I was annoyed by it because I also have that same thing. And I take responsibility for everything around me. Yeah. And sometimes I don't like it. But I realize it's because I'm scared that who's going to take responsibility for me? And by looking for that thing so much, I sometimes have driven past people who are ready to love me, who are ready to be there for me. I had a birthday party recently, a couple of years back, that people threw for me. And there were so many people there, and each of them, there was such a big connection. And other guys were saying like, man, how do you have all these friends yet you keep saying you're an introvert? Yeah. I was like, I think I'm fortunate. I've been able to see something in them, be there for them. Now I just have to learn how to let them be there for me. Yeah. But it's hard when you living an independent life has worked out. So this is why it goes back to the other question of planned kids and people who've made it. You reach a certain point where, by the logic of the world, you've done okay. Now all of a sudden you have to break up that thread, solidarity with other people, sharing with people, and
loving other people.
That's why when people go to church and they say, tell your neighbor that you love him, I think we have the right reaction by going, because we are doing a sentiment that is not genuine. Yeah. But if you're around people who genuinely love you, you don't even have to say it. That the love shows up in the way you do it. Yeah. So, I think in terms of the traumas, I've given up on completely healing all of them. I am now traversing them. I'm recognizing them and saying, is this poisoning me? Okay, how can I try and fix it? And understand that I'm going to be an unfinished project. Yeah. That's why I can grow. That's why I can change. In 10 years, something else will happen. Yeah. And to just have some grace about it and know that other people are also going through the same thing.
Yeah. I see. There's something when you're talking about like shadow work and trauma, and shadow work is in the healing journey is one of the hardest things, because it requires you to actually, for once, take responsibility for your own actions, your own behavior, your own life, you know,
Yeah.
and understanding that it's not their fault, it's not not your fault as well, but
It's your responsibility.
it's your responsibility, you know. So when I started my own healing, I realized that trauma is a safe space to be in because you are traumatized.
So Bambi, that's why you're the way you are. Anyway, it's okay.
Your father didn't love you. I'm so sorry. That's why you're a mean person.
Yeah.
Oh, you just fucked over that guy. Your mother. I'm so sorry. It's so safe that it can keep us there for the longest time. And when the shadow brings itself out, it's easy to cover ourselves back. I had this vision one time where, so I last year I quit my job, and I'd been at that job for like 6 years. And for me, it was the job that I felt it was a job that took me in, not the job I went and, I was seeking for and everything. Yeah. So it felt more like, and this is weird to admit here, but like it was a favor, you know, and so, you know, that feeling. And so for my job, I valued my boss who took me in more than anything else. So when I had that vision, it just looks like that boss phoned me. Okay, I was on psychedelics. That's
Sam?
I'll give you.
Alan once is just pretending.
this man phoned me like sick, frail, and everything, and he gave me a safety blanket, and I slept, right? And so in that vision, I could see that I'm sleeping, and it's like this beautiful warm blanket, but it's so dark and it's just covering me. So every once in a while, I could try to remove it and see a beautiful light. Then I just cover myself again, you know. But that's when I knew that, yo, it's time. You get it? Like, yo, it's time. And the shadow can be very comfortable place that can keep us in that situation. And I feel that everybody that embarks on a healing journey is very brave. It's hard, but it's very brave. I have another question. What advice, you know, in all your many years of existence, or not many, you know, depending on how you see it, what advice would you give to anybody that is sort of struggling with either acceptance or healing or life in general?
One is to, I think, just have some mercy on yourself.
Right.
Have some grace for yourself. I mean, there are many ways in which I disappoint myself. I repeat traumatic responses. There are symptoms within me that I look at and think, why can't I just be normal? Then I say, what is normal? Like, all of us have this idea of what normal is. So I think it's understanding that we often seek answers from other people because they seem more real than we do. You look at someone and go, oh, that's Beyonce. She probably has everything figured out.
Right.
So when you hear her going, I'm sad, you're like, what?
By the way, shut up.
You know what I mean?
babe.
Yeah, like you see someone is doing well, they're rich, you're like, why are you complaining? And I think it annoys us because it tears away that veil of nobody really knows what's going on. So my readjustment when the first few pieces of therapy I went for, it didn't work for me because I felt like it was very normative. It was very, get back out there and work, get back out there and, you know, be cheery, you know, talk to yourself and say positive things. I'm like, I can't talk to myself because I know, I'm like, who are you lying to?
Yeah.
But the one I learned was, instead of trying to repress the symptom or buy healing, by pay money and someone talks to you and then your symptom goes away, it is to traverse it. So maybe to explain what I mean by that, it is my idea of why you go to therapy. It's not so much to remove your symptom, it is to understand and fully love all of who you are, like the shadow.
Yeah.
So that's part of you. It's unacceptable. If you fully accepted who you are, you would become a psychotic. So in the psychoanalytic sense, to be psychotic is to not have any gap between those symbolic things about you and who you are as a person. So like if you're a mother, you go, I am the best mother in the world, and you just sit back and leave it there. No, the best mothers are the ones who are always trying to seek to be, how can I be better? So there's always a gap between how you are and how you wish you could be. So it's human, that's the human condition, that gap. And unfortunately, I think we now live in a time where perfection is the goal instead of becoming whole. Becoming whole means accepting all those things.
Yes.
And yeah, the answers are usually where you don't want to look. They're usually where stuff is painful, the stuff that triggers you, and maybe you need a friend, a partner, someone to hold your hand as you go through. And to me, the most beautiful words in the English language are, I need help.
Right.
Because it, one, admits a vulnerability to yourself, but it also allows other people to be of use to you.
Yeah.
And so far now we're like, I don't need anyone, I'm kawa. I think that's why we are so isolated. And yet we clearly are not okay. Like we are not
No,
okay.
we are not.
I keep looking around like,
No.
guys, I don't think we're doing well. We seem to be struggling, all of us, and we're all sarcastically talking about stuff to keep people at a distance. The hardest thing in the world to be is cringe right now. And being cringe is having feelings and saying, oh, I like this, oh, I'm delighted by this, or to be happy.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's where we need to start looking like, why are we so sarcastic?
Yeah.
And I suppose the way through is you can always seek. The thing I love about social media now and the information space is you can type it in and find people who look like you talking about it to give you some sort of semblance of you're not alone. And then talk to some people around you. The first discussion is always the hardest, but for me it has never returned void. You know, you can never say something in truth or in earnestness. It might feel terrible when you're saying it, but after you've said it, you create so much healing for other people, and you don't know who you're going to open up.
Yeah.
It gets much better. I think the hardest thing for me was knowing that you can live a life where you only realize this when the people who you wanted to say it to are gone.
Yeah.
When you start, it's at the end of your life and you're feeling like, oh God, why did I spend so much time in this place? The anger which I had when I think I left the faith was, I thought I had lost a lot of time. But unbeknownst to me, I had to go through that to get to the realization. So the only thing I'll say is that we are all in pain, but we have each other. So if you can find some people, whether it's the guys you hang around with, your family, whatever the case may be, take the chance of saying something that really matters to you. True loneliness, I think, comes from it's not having people around you, it's having people around you that you can't say the things that matter the most to you about. So I think as a kid, I experienced it as an adult, but every single time I try and talk about it, I mean, look at my damn podcast. I'm talking about things that people are like, what? Why are you discussing Epictetus? But I've connected with people in such a deep way, and I feel like I have emptied my soul. So yeah, speak your truth.
Yeah.
It's going to be imperfect.
Yeah.
But you'll find other imperfect people who will, you know, it will resonate. To be human is to want to be seen, and let them see the real you, not the made up you.
Yeah. Yeah. In your 23 lessons on Twitter, the 18th lesson was about rationalizing feelings. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, my biggest tendency is I can think abstractly. I can create so many conventional arguments. It's a good thing I never went into law. Because a lawyer can just be like, I can argue something I don't believe in until you get me, poke enough holes and leave you there.
Right.
But I think the dangerous thing, especially if you're clever, is you can talk your way out of fully appreciating that you're an emotional being. And emotions to me are much more ancient. They connect with us on a level that logic has yet to ever reach. If you look through all Aristotle, who came up with the 3 laws of logic, wrote about emotions way more. Because his point was, it's so immediate. When you feel sad, you know, I remember reading this from a book, that when you feel sad, when you cry, by the time you notice why you're crying, your brain is trying to come up with a reason why. So our conscious minds are not fully aware of what's going on within us.
Okay.
But within your body, you know, when you meditate, when you sit back, there is some knowledge that escapes articulation.
Yeah.
And for me, that's beyond rationalization. It's part of life to help you navigate, but it's not everything. And if you try and fit it in there, and I think that's where even organized religion ended up. It ended up taking the embodied feeling of you and I are sitting here as two separate things, but I feel a kinship with you. I understand that you're different from everything else around you when I look into your eyes. It takes a lot of rationalization for me to look at you as an enemy, for me to look at you as a separate thing, for me to not feel that pain that you're feeling.
Yeah.
You don't have to teach someone what pain is, what laughter is, what joy is. Imagine, that's why when I say you're trying to program a computer to get that, it's not something that developed just shortly, and I don't think we can fully understand it. Whenever I meditate or sit back, sometimes I get conscious of my heartbeat, and then I go, my brain is doing that. The same brain that thinks there's other things. But how come I'm not consciously aware of it? So there's much more to me than I am aware of.
Yeah.
And I suppose rationality that doesn't include the fact that the universe is wondrous.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much we don't know. There's so much that we can be curious about.
Yeah.
To limit ourselves to that is I think, kind of crazy. I mean, a few hundred years ago, people believed the craziest things. How much more are the things we believe now going to be seen as crazy?
Yeah.
But throughout eternity, to take care of someone, to love someone,
Yeah.
that's what has always been
Yeah.
human. And on the other spectrum, we try and remove our evil and say that it's not also human. But for me, I think that humans are more cruel than animals,
Yeah.
because we are the only ones that can hurt someone with the intention of hurting them.
Yes.
Like an animal will like just, it's afraid of you, bite you and then move on. It's not like sitting there, I'm going to make this guy suffer.
Some people plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even to know your own evil allows you to then say, okay, I'm dangerous.
Yeah.
If I go this way, I'll be off. Now, if you can rationalize it and say, oh, no, evil is not a real thing. Come on, man. People just follow incentives. It's not a convincing answer. It's not a compelling one. The image I have in my mind is a person riding a horse, and you who's riding a horse, you think you're in charge. If you've ever ridden a horse, you are not in charge. The horse is letting you direct it. If it decides we're going this way, you'll just have to find out some reason for you to go that way. So yeah, to me, it's weird when you hear a philosophy fan saying that, but all of philosophy begins with love. I mean, love of wisdom. It starts with an emotion. It starts with an orientation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think unfortunately we've tried to separate logic and rationality from emotion, yet they came from the same place. They shouldn't be split up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can just only be used in terms of, let's use this rationality to achieve this goal.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's actually true. I feel on a general level that as human beings, we are only here to love. Everything else is happening, but love is just what we are here to do.
I mean, even if the universe is like, like those guys will say it's going to have a heat death.
Yeah.
Nothing will ever exceed this. There is no meaning to the universe. I'm like, you cannot live without meaning.
Yeah.
Even when you have it in your head,
Yeah.
I'll just look at your actions and say, what you choose to do with your time means something. And I always like that in the movie Troy,
Yeah.
when Achilles is asked, don't you wish you were like the gods? It was like, I think the gods envy us because we are mortal. This moment can never come again.
Yeah.
So to them, what is eternity? It's like, and every day can just keep going on.
Yeah.
Eternal life is true meaninglessness, because there is no end, there is no
Yeah.
purpose, there is nothing that's going to, but everything is more beautiful because we are fragile. Flowers are more beautiful because they will fade. Like, there is going to be an end. The meaning of life is that it ends.
Yeah.
What are you going to do in this short time that you have? I mean, I just think love not in just the sentimental way, but in the actions, that where I am considerate of you, I understand that your happiness multiplies mine. Like, if you're laughing, I'm also happy. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
No problem at all. I wasn't going to come up with some philosophical sort of thing to say.
This year I'm going to just start saying simple words.
Be who you are. Be authentic. Be yourself.
Who am I? I secretly think sometimes. Like I look in the mirror and I go, but am I really a person?
What do you think? A crab?
No, because I'm a lobster. I think modern neoliberal life is like go deep inside. You'll find new liberals. If you look deep inside, you will find the true version of you. Now, this might be the most controversial thing. I don't know how you will take it, but to me, authenticity is just the very mask that you present to yourself. So when you look inside, who is looking? And whatever you find, what's going? People say my true self is generous and nice, and like it's always like you're reading your own press a little bit.
Yeah.
So shadow work helps you see that part of you that's disgusting, that's terrible, and then you realize that you can't quite close that gap. So for me, the failure to close that gap is where change comes from. I think the real me can only come from me watching my actions, not me going deep inside. How I show up here, how I treat Allah, and how I do it. I'm like, that's who I am. There might be some deep down inside, but that deep down inside is simply potentiality. And unless you live it out, you can go to your grave with that potentiality. But shall we call you what your potential is, or shall we call you what you really did? Yeah. So for me, authenticity has to come in the way that we live, and that's why I feel like now I'm okay, but I feel disgruntled. I feel like I disapprove of the social order that we are living in. I think it's poisonous to us, and no matter how much self-comfort we get, no matter how much we try and say, but in my secret life I'm okay, we die dissatisfied because we know we could have done better. We know we could have lived better. And I have been reading Eugene Debs, who was a socialist back in the 1900s, and he has this beautiful line where he says, I feel a deep kinship with everyone on this planet. And that means that if there is a person who is poor, that is my brother, that is my sister. If there's someone in prison, I can never be free. And all the logical structures we put in and say, that's not my family, that's not my country. Like you live the world and look at it, all these things that we created they're segmentations to just keep a certain logic apart. But everyone knows what human pain feels like. Everyone knows what human need feels like. And it's weird that we look at ourselves under a system that encourages selfishness, and then we say humans are selfish. It's almost like seeing me in a car where there's a lot of smoke coughing, and they say, oh, it seems humans cough. Like, no, I'm in a place where there's smoke. Remove the smoke and I'll act differently. So, I just thought I should say that that's where my heart is. I sometimes feel disheartened, and I know many people feel that, and they feel nihilistic. And I was just thinking about that Marx line that religion is the sigh of an oppressed creature. It is the flower in the chain. It is the opium, and people read it as if he's saying, oh, it's just delusional. It's like, no, it's the way we've found to comfort ourselves. It's the way we found, and to me, I join in that goal that he has of saying, let's pluck that flower. Let's actually live the kingdom of God here on earth. Like, we have the power to do it. It goes back to, I can't do it as an individual, but look at what we were able to build together. Maybe we can do it together. And I might not see it in my lifetime, but you can be one of the pebbles that tried to move things in a different direction. End of my sappy speech.
I was just going deep into it, But
that's what she said.
There's this question I always like to ask the people that I talk to, knowing what you know now. What's that one thing you would tell your little inner child then, who was like very scared, very unaware, and in pain? or whatever, what would you tell them now?
Buy Google stocks. No.
It's a good one though.
Buy Google shares, my friend. Whoa!
Eh?
An Apple. I think probably that it's all right to be a little weird. You feel weird, but all the things you've tried to do to be cool, to be whatnot, I don't accept it. I find it hard to even accept compliments around, oh, either you look nice or you seem clever. Those seem. I'm having to learn how to accept them. But what I really enjoy is being weird, is being different, because then I feel like, yeah, I'm a person. I was born at a certain time, I had certain experiences, and I'm weird. So it's okay to be weird. That weird will allow you to do things differently, to be a CEO differently, to be a friend differently. And it'll be all right. It'll be all right. By it being all right doesn't mean that everything will work out. It just means that you find a way for all of it to make sense. The definition of trauma that I've understood is that you've failed to symbolically and emotionally connect what has happened to you. So something happens, you just have no way of reintroducing it into your idea of the world. And we spend our lives trying to do all of that. But just like with the thing I was saying with my dad, the experiences I've had where trauma has been healed, it's not when I was trying to do it in my own strength. It's when I opened up and said, I'm hurt, I'm in pain. And usually when I went to the bottom of it, I was holding on to that pain. It's weird that, I think I'll tell that young me to always remember that there's a reason we repeat our traumas. We repeat them because we hope this next cycle will somehow resolve it. But we're just repeating what's comfortable. It's you coming back and putting that blanket over. You tear it off and be uncomfortable. Staying in discomfort long enough, it will eventually also become comfortable.
Very wise words. So we're gonna make like a quote and say by Joe. Speaking of by Joe, how many names do you have? So I was trying to.
Anthony Muhumza Arali.
Wow. Okay. I was very confused when I was trying to. So I'm saying Joe, then I'm saying Jay, then I'm saying Anthony, then I'm saying Arali. I'm like, Jesus Christ, give me a break.
Yeah, multiple people.
I see. I see. That's so good. So that's really it. Thank you for having this conversation. I keep saying that I think I started this podcast to selfishly heal myself because through the different conversations I have with people, there's so much that I learn. And so I think it's for me. I have to admit that. Because today something different has actually really shifted in me and I'm very grateful for this conversation.